Hello and a very warm welcome to everyone. With something like quantitative investing, sure, there are mathematical methods or data analysis or statistical analysis to be deployed to form some trading strategies and manage risk. But at a time when it is said that the golden age of artificial intelligence is underway, can the power of AI be harnessed to navigate investing? Can an AI powered portfolio disrupt the very foundations of investment strategies to not just analyze market trends, but predict them? Can AI help lead the crowd instead of following it? What does this revolution look like? To break it all down, please help me welcome Chetan Mehra, Head of Quantitative Investment at Bandhan Asset Management. Chetan, it's my sheer pleasure and privilege to have you on this podcast. We got talking initially before the podcast, very sort of interesting conversation. The first ones, Bandhan Asset Management, to really introduce machine learning to the portfolio management space. Tell me, how did you get there? How was the evolution like? What really was the journey till now? Yeah.
Firstly, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I've been at Bandhan now for 5 years. Um, I think it all starts with the vision of our CEO, who wanted to ensure that we are future ready in some ways, because the pace at which the world is moving, the pace at which data is being generated, and how globally our competition is sort of adapting to new methods and new technologies. We wanted to get the grounding, get the base work done. So we invested a fair amount of time in building the infrastructure and building some of the models that we use. So we're not just building models for our portfolio, but we are generally building a lot of infrastructure and models which can be used by other departments in the future. So the vision is to have the capability and to leverage it in a robust manner going forward. So that's really the overarching vision for the firm. And I remember when I started here, it was just me, and now we are a four-man team. We have good quality programmers and developers and quantitative analysts. So we build it up quite nicely, and we are improving month by month, and we hope to continue to do that.
Thanks for that, Chetan. When you said that you're also building this infrastructure for other departments, what exactly do you mean? Is it like a white label kind of product that you're building? What is it really?
So not really that far. When you're using machine learning or using artificial intelligence, what you really need is good quality data. Because in machine learning, if you don't have data, there's nothing to learn from.
Mm-hmm.
So how you set up your foundational data layer, some people call it data lake, depending on the size of the data. So if it's a lot of data, it's a data lake. How you set that up and how the systems are going to consume it makes a huge amount of difference, because we save and consume a large amount of data. The data is still, before it goes into the machine, has to be cleaned. You have to ensure that you're not introducing biases. You have to ensure you're not sort of adding errors to the data. So how the data is cleaned, how the data is prepared is extremely important, because once the machine starts consuming the data, the machine doesn't know there's an error in the data. You've just given it the data to consume, so it'll learn it. It will learn from that data. So there is an initial stage at which you have to have a separate set of models, which are not only getting the data out from different sources, but they're looking for errors, they're looking for data jumps, they're looking for misprints, they're looking for data not changing, for example. So sometimes you can get a data set which has not changed in 3 years, but you're just still getting the same observation. So there are a lot of checks which you have to go through before the data actually becomes consumable. And then comes the stage of, your analysis of the data, and then how you're going to, maybe transform it. And then the machine learning for investments has to be done after that. So everybody thinks that you just take some data and you just chuck it in and it's all going to work. There's a whole lot of grunt work before that. So I would say almost 80% of our work is ensuring that what gets consumed is reliable, is of high quality, and that's a lot of work.
Okay. So, Chetan, I'm going to approach this podcast like a student, right? Understanding the nuances of technology, machine learning, artificial intelligence, though they all sit in the same breath in the realm of investing. So, the first step, what I'm understanding is sanitizing the data, making sure that the data set is clean, where the 80% of work goes to. So, how do you do that? Can you give me the actualities of it?
So, see, we create a lot of data at this moment on this planet. Whether we send an email, whether we send a text, whether we are using a map, whether we are creating data constantly. Your phone is creating location data constantly, and it is sharing this with other applications which you have agreed to. So there is a lot of data which is out there. Now, what data you consume depends on what problem you're trying to solve. So as my supervisor used to tell me, spend most of your time specifying the problem correctly. Because if you've specified the problem correctly, you will solve the problem. Otherwise, you will solve something else. So once we define what we want, what problem we are looking to solve, we have to understand what are the data points that are relevant for it. So we are using most of the data we need is for portfolio construction. How do we get our end product is a robust portfolio, which does well in the market. Now, for that, we take a lot of financial information. So, for example, we consume balance sheet information, profit and loss information, price information, volatility information, other macroeconomic data points. A lot of data points come in. Now, luckily for this problem, we have reasonably reliable, good sources of data. And I shouldn't be that comfortable with that. So, for example, when we started here, I wanted to ensure how good was our data. So what we did was something a lot of people don't really do is we did a data audit. Now, what a data audit requires is that you take an initial dump of whatever the source of your data is, however expensive it is. You see the data that they are giving and an actual print from the source. So let's say I am looking at earnings data for, let's say, a company or a release of financial information from, let's say, Infosys. So I will actually take the information from Infosys, which they released, and what the machine's giving me. When is it updating it? When was it released? When was it updated in their database? I need the date for that. When was it available for download for us? So you will find that if you do your data audit properly, there are 3 or 4 dates which are kind of important, which most data vendors, if they are good data vendors, will tell you, is the release date of the information, the capture date of the information, the insertion date in their database of that information, sanitized, and when it becomes available to you for download. So let's say a company has released earnings yesterday. The data provider should have captured that yesterday. Now I want to know when did they insert it in their database? They might have captured it, but they have not inserted it in their database for consumption. So that may happen in 2 days' time. And when do they take the switch that this database now should be available for download? So the earnings might have come yesterday, but if it becomes available to me after 3 days, I need to make a note of that my data is going to come 3 days late. So we did this for 4 data providers, global players. And some of them were actually not updating their databases as far out as almost 3 weeks, which was kind of staggering for me. I was like, okay, you have this data, it has been released. Now you're going to make this available to me in 3 weeks. So I'm running this model and I'm downloading this data point and I'm getting a stale data point.
Wow. Wow.
So that happens. But this is what, if you're doing good machine learning, if you're doing good audits, you will catch these things.
So audits are at frequent intervals. They're regular, these data audits that happen.
I personally do a check. So we did an extensive audit. We did a very extensive audit when I first joined. It took us 6 months. And in those 6 months, that time horizon, we looked at 4 different providers. Some of them will not give you data. Some of them will say, well, I'll give you a small sample. So there's a whole lot of to and fro. Before you get the data, it takes like 2 or 3 weeks.
So Chetan, so data is at the heart of the
Yes.
decision making, because ultimately you're analyzing this data, you're consuming this data, which is being fed into analyzing it. So the data is at the heart of the decision making process. Understood that part. Now, if I say from a consumer perspective, I open a Grow app, I have a fund which actually is being marketed by the name of the fund manager. Suppose Parag Parekh Flexi Cap Fund, just giving you an example. And against that, there's a Bandhan Fund, which basically is machine driven, right? So for me as a consumer, what gives me more comfort? A man whose brand is there or a machine?
See, that depends on the maturity of the investor. So India in many ways is not a very well-informed and mature market. Firstly, you could be, so both the funds could be looking at the same universe or might even have the same benchmark. So they are comparable. It all depends on how good you are. So like there is a study, it's a very old study, which said that only 5% of asset managers actually outperform the benchmark, S&P 500. And this is a very old study. Now, if you look at a lot of machine-driven funds, they are cyclical sometimes, but most of them tend to outperform or reach their goal because you have defined them well. So, as I said in the beginning, how well do you define your problem? How prudently you choose the tools that you're going to apply, and how well you sort of set it up, which takes me to the most important point of machine learning and actually investing using machine learning is the whole idea is to remove your biases and let the data do the talking. Now, a lot of people come out and say, oh, yes, we are data driven, we have no biases. And that has to be taken with a pinch of salt, because the only way you do that is to do good science. To do good science is not that you studied mathematics or physics. Many people who have studied mathematics and physics don't know how to do science. You have to be trained as a scientist. To be trained as a scientist means you know how to set up an experiment objectively before you do the experiment. You have to know what your hypothesis is. You have to know at what level you reject it or accept it. And you have to follow that process systematically. And when the evidence says you have to reject it or accept it, you accept it diligently. And if you have to make modifications for subsequent tests, you do that. But you make that observation that we are now changing thresholds because we observed something. So here what happens is you're following a discipline and you're following the evidence. And the beauty of that is that you can always go back, revisit. See, human beings don't have a very good memory. Everybody thinks they are wonderful investors because they only remember the good bits. Nobody remembers the bad bits.
Absolutely.
The good bit when you're doing good science is you keep the evidence, you see the evolution, and you follow it systematically. So if something has to change, I can always go back to our tests and say, oh, this is what we were doing, or this was the error, or there was a data point missing. So we have, I would say, north of maybe 800 or 900 tests which are in big zipped files, results of things that we have done in the last 5 years. So the difference between a fund manager who is running it on whichever, I read a report and I think this is a good stock, and somebody who's doing a machine learning based thing, is the process. So not everybody who uses machine learning is maybe doing good science. So you will get some who are just saying, oh, this fits, it works for now, let's do this. And humans have a tendency to do that. And it's a very slippery slope. It's a very, very slippery slope. So you will find the ones which do good science and follow a scientific process. They will, and if they're communicating what they're doing, they will keep doing it. And they will keep delivering the results as the model has shown to do, till it changes and it has to be retrained. So it's a very different thing. You can get models which underperform or do better, but as long as you follow a scientific process, you will be able to do better than a lot of things. Which, if you've done the scientific process right. Now, the beauty of doing science is it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you fail 99% of the time. Now, not everybody has the grit in them to wake up every day in the morning, say, I failed yesterday, I'm going to do better today, and then fail again that day, and then wake up the next day and say, I'm going to do better today because I think I know how to improve it, or I think maybe I've misspecified the test, or I'll revisit how I've specified the problem.
Thanks for that, Chetan. Thanks for clarifying that. So it's not really just a man versus machine conversation. You can't be simplified to just that okay, there's a fund manager which is human, there's a fund manager which is machine driven. The difference is the science behind it. And how you approach that science is all the more important, because there could be others also who could be doing machine learning, like as you said, but how you approach the entire problem, how you define the entire problem, what is this level and set of data that you feed into, how frequently do you do data audit, and how specifically are you ensuring that there are no biases, quote unquote, which really is the key differentiator, which perhaps just by the nature of it, human beings could miss. There could be implicit biases, like you mentioned, that who really has the grit and tenacity of going through data audits, who really has the grit and tenacity to feed in and ask every day, okay, I failed previously, how can I do it again the next day? So what is really at the work which I'm understanding is the science, and the science is being done by the humans.
Yes.
Which is the
And you
differentiation.
can have a bias in that, yes.
Yes.
So,
Which is the differentiation.
it's a very good point. So I'll be upfront. I'm biased towards scientific processes. So that's my bias, and I'm aware of that because I've done this many times. Now, I might have an error in my approach, right? So I could be doing science incorrectly, or might be missing something. I might have 11 steps and I'm doing only 10. It's very easy to do that. The reason I have this bias, and I accept it, and I will continue to do it this way, is I have an objective way of knowing what I'm doing wrong and how I can improve it, because I have all these tests which have results. And to put it, bluntly, today, we all believe in science. You wouldn't be getting on a plane if you didn't believe in science. True. It's only through a lot of work that we know that this plane will stay afloat. You only take medicines because it's been using a scientific process. You only took the vaccine because scientists made it using a machine learning algorithm, by the way. The fact is, there is a lot of evidence around me. There is a lot of evidence which is documented scientifically. And there is a clear path for me or any other scientist to sort of do something properly and build on it. Science is something you can build on. So there is a lot. I feel very, very comfortable in that zone. That okay, I can look for a paper which will solve a certain problem which I may be doing wrong. I may read 3 papers in a week. I might email the author saying, I don't really understand this bit. Do you have a bunch of code which I'm unable to program this little complexity that you have? And scientists are very helpful. They may read the email a week later, but they are very excited. It's like, oh, somebody's interested in my obscure work.
I
So,
know.
so they are always very helpful. So for me, it's a reasonably objective way of doing things because my brethren, my community of scientists have been delivering the goods in all sorts of fields.
Understood, Chetan. So now let's talk in the science language, okay? For this entire platform that you're building, if you were to sort of draw a flow chart, okay? Let's draw the flow chart. Step one, step two, step three, they're all connected. So I'll just first tell you what I'm understanding, and then you could probably correct me. So the first step is feeding the data and feeding
No,
the correct sanitized data. Okay, now please correct me. Just what I want to get
the
correct.
first step is writing down what you're trying to solve.
Hmm. Which is again human driven, a
Well,
human
you
decision.
have to, yes, you may do it, you may misspecify the problem. If you misspecify the problem, you'll have to revisit. So it's an iterative process. The first question you have to ask, what do I want to do? What do I want to achieve? You write it down, you think about it, you write it in different forms. Then the next thing that you do is you find out, or you start writing down, what are the data sources which could help me?
That's the second step.
Yeah. So you have to identify, do I have the data for this? Okay. Maybe you list 10 different things. You find out what are the data sources. Can you get the data? Do you have to pay for it? How much do you have to pay for it? Then once you know what data sources you will start with, then you get hold of the data, then you look at the raw dump. Is this a good quality data set? Is it cleaned? So there are a lot of companies which will say, we give you clean data. And they might not be cleaning it properly. Or they might be cleaning it using the wrong method.
Hmm.
For example, I may be looking at GDP data, okay? GDP data comes out every quarter. Let's say there's a data point missing. So that's 6 months. So I have the first quarter and I have the third quarter. I don't have the second quarter. A lot of people do, let me average these 2 points in, right? What's the problem in that? You've taken the average of the first and the third. Well, you've taken a data point from the future and brought it back. You've built in a forward-looking bias already in the data. So you have to know the methodologies they use. So mostly what we do is we try to take a raw dump. Unless we know that this firm has competent people who we have spoken to on how they are cleaning this data. And are we okay with that? Because there are 7 or 8 different ways you could fill a data point.
So
And
first is defining the problem. Second is the collection of data, making sure that the data is
identifying the
correct.
data before you collect the data. What are your data sources you
Okay.
think might help you? Then you get hold of the data. Then you
Mm-hmm.
see if this data is actually worthy of being used. Maybe you don't have a long enough history.
Hmm.
Maybe you only have data points which start in, let's say, 2019. Secondly, what about situations where the data that you're consuming, how it is being processed has changed? Like in India, there have been several accounting changes. The way accounting is done, how frequently it is reported, let's say a holding company, a company may have 6 other companies underneath it. Do you report the main company's number? Do you report them all together, 7 companies? So a lot of these things have changed. Now the issue is, when did this change? This is a clear break in the data because the law has changed. So how do you treat that? Do you make a change? Do you make an adjustment? Have they made the adjustment? Do you have to make the adjustment? And once you've cleaned the data and are ready to consume, to do some analysis on it, you do some exploratory data analysis. You see how well how well the information is portrayed, what are the distributions, etc. And then when you are happy, then you go into doing some machine learning. So it's cumbersome. And it has to be. You cannot, if you've taken shortcuts in the first 3 steps, you are most certainly not going to have a very good model.
Thanks for clarifying that and giving us a roadmap. I think what you are calling is cumbersome is really the edge. It's
Exactly.
really the edge, right? Because the path to that before the machine learning has to be so clear, so sanitized, has to be so accurate, because that will define and that will basically affect the result.
Yes. So
The
this is
data that
why,
will be.
if you go back 10 years, when we would take during my PhD, we'd take some projects which would come from, let's say, the medical school, whose building was not very far from ours. We want to do this, we want to do that. If I'm getting medical images from which I'm going to learn, I'm not a doctor. I am not going to be able to specify the problem as precisely as an expert on that topic. So we used to always team up with an expert. So we worked on a project in which we were trying to figure out from the images of, women who were pregnant, whether the umbilical cord was around the child's neck. Now it's a very grainy image, and we had to get to the level of, somebody who has 30 years of experience. Now, if you don't, how you consume that data, what behavior we're trying to capture, or it could be something else, other images of maybe, scans of people's lungs, etc. How do you specify this problem correctly so that the machine can learn is extremely important.
So Chetan, what I'm understanding from you is that now in this world of generative AI, you have a machine, Chat GPT, the entire art of getting the correct answers from Chat GPT really lies in giving the correct sort of prompts. You have to give the correct prompts. And you are a master, is what I'm understanding, in defining the problem,
No,
in
no, no. So that's
exactly
slightly
refining that
different.
prompt, right? And I think which is where perhaps the human fund manager quotient, and just by the virtue and just by the nature of being a human, could perhaps oversee some of these elements, like the minor nuances of, like what you mentioned, the GDP data. Is it quarter 1 or quarter 3? The minute things, because the details perhaps lie in the minutiae, and you kind of just sort of tend to overlook that, right? And which is perhaps the cumbersome becomes the edge when it's a machine learning process. Can we say that?
Yes, partially. The generative AI is a slightly different family of models. I would say that you definitely you can't just put a machine learning engineer and say, solve this problem, um, or predict this. You definitely need expertise on the topic. And that is extremely important at the very outset, because that comes at the very first step of defining the problem. So a person like me who doesn't have a medical background, if I'm working on something to do with healthcare, I would like to spend as much time with an expert on that field, including the doctor or the nurses or the oncologist or whatever it is, that I consume as much information from them as possible, sit down with them and specify what we are trying to solve. Because then I will engineer my data. So when you get data, it's not just you just put in raw data, you engineer it, you have transformations, etc., because it has to sort of be a reasonable data set for the machine to consume. So you have to sit down, you have to have domain knowledge. If you don't have domain knowledge, you will struggle and you will waste compute time. Like, for example, when you are programming something, you don't sit in front of the computer and start programming. That is typing. That is the last thing you do. You write the program, the design, before you even type your first word on the computer. So you have to really, really specify the problem in as detailed a manner as possible. And that's when the moment you specify the problem extremely well, you are really halfway through to the solution.
So, Chetan, tell me, with something like AI, what exactly we've understood the entire process. And thank you so much for sort of laying out the roadmap. So, how much is the decision making tech driven versus human driven? I wanted to understand that.
That all depends on the algorithm you're using. The
Mhm.
algorithm choice depends on the problem that you're trying to solve and also the distribution of the data. So, I mean, there are thousands of machine learning algorithms, literally thousands. And I have to have enough knowledge about the underlying problem and enough understanding of the underlying data to choose the right algorithm. I can solve a question in, I can use 7 or 8 algorithms. They will all work because they are approximately, has something better than the other. But some of them will be much better than the other because maybe they capture the distribution of the data better. So it all
But I'm
depends.
understanding the underlying outcome for each of it for a fund house like yours would be outperformance, right? To say that, okay, the desired result is, say, 20% XIRR is what I'm looking at. So for most of it, I'm understanding the result and outcome would be that, right?
So you're looking for outperformance, but with how much risk? See, a lot of investors do not pay attention to risk. It's like, as long as I make money, I don't care. But actually, you should care because your model might be capturing the upside at this moment in time, but there is possibly a very big downside, which will make you lose a fair bit. So the way it's again how you define the problem. Do you just want to make money at any
Mm-hmm.
cost? Then you can buy maybe a single stock you think and put 100% of your money,
I
right?
think most of us are looking that for mutual fund buying, right? I mean, I'm buying mutual fund and just buying it and forgetting about it. The power of compounding takes care of it in the next 5 years. If I get my 15% IRR, I'm happy with it. Most of us, most Indians are, right? I'm just talking about the
Yes. So, I mean, there are so many moving parts to this. Do you make money? Do you retain it? So at
Hmm.
15%, you are obviously retaining it. That's a massive assumption, right? I started my career during the Asian crisis, and the Russian crisis happened right in front of my eyes. Most investors, young investors especially, have not seen what that is. They don't know what a global financial crisis looks like. They don't know what a bubble looks like. They don't know. I mean, some of them have not even seen 2007, 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so uh, understanding your domain and understanding whether you'll be able to sort of sustain it, because the mutual fund might be doing its job well, but the macro situation might get so bad, and whatever you do, you will not perform.
So that
Like,
comes my flip question to you. Do you think that what you mentioned, that these kind of movements that happen, crisis, and then you have something which is a black swan kind of an event like pandemic that happens. So
yes.
how effective is the algorithm to factor in some of these things, right?
Well, if you're feeding in the data, then it will. So, like a lot of people did ask me during when the pandemic happened, I was like, is the algorithm predicting a pandemic? I was like, I am not feeding in any news or medical data or previous pandemics. It's not how I've defined the problem. I am not trying to capture global news trends. You see, you can't just chuck in any data. So if you look at our performance, we actually did extremely well. I mean, we had significant outperformance in January, February, and March. We peaked 1 month after the market, and we recovered full 1 month before to our high before the pandemic. So yes, we did well. We were fully invested. We went down fully invested. We could so people would come and say, well, why didn't you take a cash call? So we try not to intervene. If you believe in your model, if you're doing your science right, it should work. And it
So,
did.
so you chose not to feed it with the pandemic information.
Of course, I mean, it was not trained for it. The model is not trained for it. We are solving a portfolio management problem. We are not feeding it CNN news feeds. The other challenge really was nobody really knew what the truth was because this was all very hushed up with China. So I remember 24th or the 26th of January, we heard about COVID, and it was like, one or two mentions somewhere in a small piece. And then in February, mid-February,
It got
It
blown
sort of
up.
became a big thing because it started to spread in Italy and Europe, where the media is free to say whatever it wants. But we were not getting any information out of China. So again, if we are assuming that a media is giving us good quality information, I can feed it in and say, okay, this is good quality. We are learning the right things. But if you're not, if you don't have a reliable data source, how do you take that call? Because the machine is going to hug the data. It's an optimization function.
So I think somewhere, like you said, that if you look at the stock markets in isolation, it really, really is very information driven. Some market movement happens, some story happens, and
Yes.
then the stock goes up and down. But because you're constructing a portfolio, you don't necessarily have to like really, really look after stock specific movement, right? So that sort of takes care of it. That is number one. But suppose when you're computing a portfolio, out of 100%, if you have, say, 10% exposure to a particular company, which might have tanked for some reason, maybe the CFO turns out to be fraud, there's some RBI issue with that company. And if you are not feeding that data, then how is the algorithm really factoring that in there? Then in that
So,
scenario, do you think a human fund manager is better off to
see, there
react?
will always be situations where something horrible can go wrong. And it does happen. Case in point was Infosys in 2019. There was a news which came out that Infosys had done something. I remember Infosys opened 18% down. We had a large position. We had a diversified portfolio. We did not underperform. We had a large position. I remember we opened down, I still remember some 84 bips impact on the portfolio from Infosys, which is a huge impact. If you account for all the things that can possibly go wrong at your construction stage, so you make risk management a part of your
Hmm.
portfolio construction,
Hmm.
you will do things reasonably intelligently. There are obviously going to be some things which can go, south very fast, and every investor knows that. And many humans miss it. Many algorithms pick it way before everybody else and outperform. So it goes both ways. So in our case, we try to not take any kind of huge position. Our positions are very diversified. We are looking for broad behavior. We try not to get overly exposed to any single situation, because you obviously pay attention to the weights which come into play. But yes, there's always a chance, and there's always a chance you'll get hit. There's always a chance that there'll be something which is not in your portfolio, goes up, 50% in a day. I mean,
Yeah, that
so
could also, it's an outlier can also be there,
yes.
definitely.
Yeah, so
But
it
the
goes.
heart of it is really behavioral science.
Sorry,
It's really behavioral science at the heart of it, right? How do
in
you
finance.
compute? Yeah, in finance and like even this portfolio construction, what you're doing. Like if I were to draw this Venn diagram, so at one part it is things that you can control, and then there's things you can't control, and
Yeah,
then you further divide that thing of things you can control into further 10 or 12 steps, right?
possibly, yes.
Yes.
The way I see the market, I see the equity market as a discounting mechanism. So what I mean by that is the market today is not showing you where the economy and the country is here today. That everybody knows. The market is trying to tell you where we think we will be in 12 months is shown today. So if you tell me, Chetan, I have this company, we are growing at 25%, and our profits are growing at 25%. And you say this as a CEO and the stock goes up. The market will say, okay, saying 20, 25, maybe it'll hit 15, right? That's your conservative estimate. Maybe you are in a sector which is doing extremely well, and they'll say, saying 25, I think it could be 45. So it might break up or further up. So what you're really doing is the market is discounting the future to its present value and says, I think this is where we are. It is the expectation. Of course, history matters, how we got there, what is the history of the company. But broadly, the market is a discounting mechanism.
That's very well put. And that sort of really sums it up pretty well. Chetan, tell me one thing with the advent of generative AI, and I'm just sort of assuming this question from the point of view, say, a Gen Z or a millennial first half cohort. I'm in the later part of millennial. If I were to feed a prompt on Chat GPT, construct a portfolio for me with 10 stocks on Indian Stock Exchange, Indian BSE or NSE, giving me 15% return, I do feel Chat GPT is in a position, just like on the surface level, to give me at least a portfolio of 20 stocks. And if I approach with that, do you think that I don't really know? I mean, will generative AI is a further enhancement to machine learning when it comes to stock markets investing?
So firstly, I wouldn't take that portfolio because the very simple rule, I haven't tested it out. If I don't have any evidence, you can tell me 50,000 stories about it. I'm not going to buy it because I don't have the evidence, the scientific evidence. On the other hand, on the face of it, generative AI seems like it has a lot of potential. If you look at the history, if you read the paper, which was published in 2017, the model is now 6 years old. And the improvement has all come from putting in a large amount of high quality data. Will this technology improve? I certainly hope so. It's quite powerful. Does it have room to grow? I think it has huge amount of room for improvement. I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. But that can be said for a lot of things. So largely, I feel that in the artificial intelligence as a whole has a huge amount to offer, a huge amount to deliver, and will continue to do so for decades now. Because we still need a lot of computing power. We still need better algorithms. These are, I mean, if you go through all the algorithms, you go like, this maybe we can do better. Maybe that's just me because I think this is not smart enough. So I'm not hugely impressed by what Chat GPT or now Gemini is doing, because I think we can do a whole lot better. I think it needs to remain open source because there is a lot of stuff which is actually not released. Because you need to know the best safety that people can have, even people who build these systems and use them, they need to see what's underneath it. I think the technology has a huge amount of where it is I'd say it's a baby. It's not even a toddler. It's a baby. Can't walk. I mean, it's fun to play with it. It says some pretty silly things. But yeah, the hype is great. The hype is great. I don't mind the hype. I don't mind the hype for the reason being that people need to become aware of this. The community also needs funding for this. So
yeah, they're asking for $7 trillion now. So the
yeah,
hype is
well, I haven't.
in his favor.
It was such a huge number. I said I'm not going to read this article because I have to consume limited amount of hyped up stuff in life. I think there is a lot of work which needs to be done. I think the algos will do better. I think we need better quality data. It's the beginning. There'll be a lot more. There'll be a lot more to deliver, but there's a lot of hype, and this typically happens with every AI cycle or any tech cycle actually. I mean, neural nets were huge in the 70s and the 80s, and they didn't deliver. Then now there's this improvement. A deep neural network is a neural network, but it's just deeper. So my fear is, and I think it will happen, that we will, in the short term, not be able to deliver the excitement everybody is expecting. but we will raise enough capital and enough investment that maybe after a gap of 3 or 4 years, we'll have another seriously big improvement. And things are moving so fast, I am unable to keep pace.
I think once the froth settles down and the sort of realities will come out.
Yeah.
Chetan, if you were to give, if suppose you get about 10 minutes with Sam Altman, and what will be your advice to him? What will you tell him about how to improve Chat GPT as a model?
I don't think I'll have a lot to say to him because, I mean, he's a businessman. He was ousted and then brought back in because purely for commercial reasons. But he's a leader who seems to be inspirational. The team is behind him, and at the end of the day, we see Sam Altman. So Sam Altman is not doing any of the work. He's just walking around in front of TV cameras and chatting with important people. It is the people underneath who will build this and will never be thanked. And what you need is, if you are able to raise funding, and that's really his job is nothing else. His job is to raise funding to get a high quality team, large amount of resources, which they have thanks to Microsoft. They have a huge cloud platform. They are going to need that for training, for testing, for simulations. And these are important things. So Sam's doing his job, which is raise money and then raise more money and keep the conversation going, go in front of everybody else and get as much media coverage as possible.
So what will be your conversation with the data science team then? What will be your conversation with the data science team, with the people who are training the model? What will you tell them?
Well, they have a fairly good team. Ilya is a very ethical sort of a person, it seems. He seems to be caring about its misuses, etc. But then, everything gets misused. Scientists, generally just get on with their work. They're not really listening to you. They really don't. I mean, they know what they have to do. They know it's a tough job. As I said, doing good science is really, really hard. That's why very few people do it. It's a thankless job. You are underpaid. You're trying to create new knowledge. You know how hard that is. It's supremely hard. But if they can build a good team, stay, not sell their souls to the highest bidder, and do a good job, I mean, I'm rooting for them. I would say, please go ahead and do good work. I would be very supportive of them and publish your work, and hopefully, please, release the data, release the code so we can play with it.
Chetan, your heart lies in science. Is there anything in life that you like more than science? And I do see that you really keep science at the highest pedestal. And I don't agree with you that it's thankless. I think what you are doing at Bandhan AMC is really the heart and the brain of what is really powering the entire algorithm, right? So I don't really think that you should even consider yourself as that, even for once.
No, I thankless for the people in. I'm thanked enough.
That
I'm
is
thanked enough. It is the people who are working in university labs, doing crazy hours.
very true. That is true.
That a lot of these people are never appreciated. A lot of these people are creating knowledge which will, in some cases save our life, like the mRNA vaccine. I think it's a 1992-94 paper which was used. I'm sure nobody said thank you to these guys, or maybe somebody gave them an award or something after 30 years. So I mean, it's a thankless job. So I always root for them. It's hard, but they have the brain, so only they can do it. So that's the fun bit. What I like is I like nature. I like going out for walks, and I really hope we don't destroy all the nature that we have, which we are systematically doing.
Yes.
It gets it gives I clear my head and get new ideas. So I hope that environment doesn't completely disappear from the planet, or at least in India.
What will be your advice or messaging to somebody who still has that stigma or who still has that cynicism that, okay, it's machine driven? Can I really trust? So, that trust quotient, how can it really be addressed in a country like ours? Because I think it's always been very, very driven by personalities or putting a face behind whatever it is in life, be it companies or business models, like you mentioned. Maybe somebody else is doing all the job. But this entire first kind of question in coffee table conversations or going on a drink, okay, it's a machine driven platform. So, how do you sort of break that and say that you have to rebuild your trust in something like this?
See, you need to get in front of people and talk about it and deliver on the results. A lot of, as you said, personality driven and story driven is because these people have gotten in front of people and sold stories. And so we need to get more vocal about it, present more about it, and ease people because, come to think of it, your phone is full of things which are using machine learning. It's absolutely full of it. So a lot of the time people create this image, which, think this is beyond me. I don't understand this. A lot of people when I talk to them for the first time are sort of intimidated by it. That's the only thing. The other problem is there are a lot of people who have given this side of the business a little bit of a bad name because they're very good at marketing. They capture the soundbite and they just chuck it around. Now, the problem is the other side is not very aware. They don't know what is the right question to ask for this because they themselves are ill-informed. And some of these people, even though they may be or may not be doing machine learning or doing maybe a very little of it, or maybe not doing good science, and are unable to deliver, you create a bad image. So when you walk in and people go like, you do algorithmic trading? I was like, well, that's a broad term. I don't know what you're talking about. Can you be more specific? I would really like that we reduce the big terms to simple terms. Less jargon, simplify things to apples and oranges. And then once people get comfortable with that, you have to do a lot of hand holding. So there's just a little bit of discomfort. And that discomfort goes away the moment they start making money.
That is also true.
So that's and also, you deliver on the downside. Like, for example, we pride ourselves in not only making returns but also, having lower volatility than the market. A lot of people don't really pay attention to risk, whereas risk is the other side of return. So you get it wrong, it's horrible. So I think I think the media needs to portray this, write about it. Sam Altman is talking about it. I hope he does more. um, I think a lot of the super nerdy community is unable to come down to the level of the average man, and I think that's the biggest hurdle. You have to be able to simplify things. You have to be able to handhold them as much as possible, because a lot of people you say maths and they get intimidated. You
Which
say,
is very true.
And mathematics is a language. It's like learning a new language. You're just saying the same thing in a different language.
I just hope this podcast clears some of it. We really tried to approach it in a very simple way with flowcharts and diagrams and visualizations, trying to understand things clearly. But Chetan, we should again have you on this podcast on the other part too, on basically trying to understand and go deep into problem solving. How do you approach a problem? How do you define a problem? I think there could be like oodles of like lectures from you on these like topics, and there's so much to imbibe from you. But thank you so much for coming on to this. And I just hope people do understand that if a machine learning driven platform is really outperforming, there has to be some very good science behind it. And there are people who are driving the science behind it. I just hope that message gets landed to people. And thank you so much. Until the time I see you next, goodbye and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Thanks.
Thanks, Chetan.